Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome to our deep dive into truth and power. We'll be looking at how truth is perceived and manipulated, especially in politics.
Yes,
We have an expert here to help us understand it all a bit better.
absolutely.
We'll be examining this through three different lenses.
Okay.
We'll start by looking at the philosophers
Yeah.
and how they help us to understand the concept of truth.
Right.
And then we'll look at some dystopian literature that predicted many of the things that we see happening in politics today, especially regarding truth and manipulation.
Interesting.
And then we'll do a case study of the Trump administration's second term,
Okay.
looking specifically at the years 2024 to 2025.
Sounds good.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll not only understand these concepts, but also recognize them in action, helping you navigate this world overflowing with information. So let's get started with the philosophers. How can philosophers help us untangle this concept of truth, especially in politics, which is inherently subjective?
Well, philosophers offer, valuable perspectives on this. They help us analyze how truth is constructed and manipulated, especially when power dynamics are at play.
Okay.
Michel Foucault, for example.
Okay.
He argued that truth is not objective, but it's closely tied to power structures.
I see.
And he called this the regime of truth.
Regime of truth. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, Foucault believed that what a society accepts as true is often decided by those in power.
Yeah.
He said, quote, "Each society has its regime of truth, its general politics of truth. That is, the types of discourses which it accepts and makes function as true." So those in power essentially shape the narrative, defining what is true.
So if we apply Foucault's concept to modern politics, would someone like Donald Trump, who often labels anything he dislikes as fake news, be trying to establish his own regime of truth?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. By declaring certain information as fake, regardless of the evidence, Trump attempts to control what his supporters accept as truth. And that's where Foucault's insights are helpful. It's not just about disagreeing with Trump's policies, it's about recognizing the deeper power play involved when someone tries to control the definition of truth itself.
It's like he's saying, the truth is what I say it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is quite unsettling to see this play out in real time.
Absolutely. And it becomes even more critical to understand these dynamics as they become increasingly prevalent.
Okay, so Foucault shows us how truth can be shaped by power. What other philosophical perspectives can help shed some light on this?
Well, Hannah Arendt, a political theorist who lived through the rise of totalitarian regimes, provides another crucial perspective.
Okay.
She distinguishes between factual truth and political lies, highlighting the fragility of truth in the face of relentless deception. Arendt was deeply concerned about the impact of constant lying on our shared reality and our very capacity to recognize truth. She argues that the more we are bombarded with lies, the more our ability to distinguish truth from falsehood erodes, and we lose our bearings and become vulnerable to manipulation.
So, in essence, constant lying makes us cynical, and that cynicism makes us more susceptible to control.
Exactly. In her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, Arendt observed that people living under constant propaganda become acutely cynical. They're aware of the lies, but the normalization of those lies leads to acceptance and even admiration for the liar's audacity. This cynicism, this disengagement from truth, poses a significant threat to democratic societies. It creates a populace that is passive, distrustful, and ultimately easily manipulated.
Okay, so we have Foucault showing us how power shapes truth, and Arendt warning us about the dangers of constant lying. Is there another angle we can explore?
Yeah, let's look at Jean-Paul Sartre. He explored the concept of bad faith, a form of self-deception where we knowingly choose to believe a lie because the truth is too uncomfortable or inconvenient.
Can you break down bad faith for us and explain how it applies to this discussion on truth and its manipulation?
Sartre described bad faith as choosing to believe a lie, even when you know it's untrue.
Okay,
It's a way of avoiding responsibility. It's a way of taking the easy way out.
I see.
So imagine, for instance, a person who's fully aware of the climate crisis, but chooses to believe that it's a hoax because confronting that truth would require them to make significant changes to their lifestyle. They're in bad faith because they're consciously choosing to ignore the truth for their own comfort.
So essentially, it's like saying, I know this isn't true, but I'll believe it anyway because it's easier than facing the consequences of the actual truth.
That's a good way to summarize it. And this concept of bad faith applies directly to the political realm. Politicians, for instance, may start by spreading a lie for political gain, but as they repeat it and see its effectiveness, they might begin to believe it themselves, thus entering a state of bad faith. They choose to ignore the truth because the lie serves their purposes.
It seems as if these philosophical perspectives, while abstract, help us grasp the mechanics of truth and its distortion in the political sphere.
They do. And it's worth noting that some of these concepts were foreshadowed in literature, particularly dystopian fiction like George Orwell's 1984.
Right.
That's where we see these ideas come to life in a way that's both captivating and unsettling.
And we'll explore that connection next.
George Orwell's 1984, it's more relevant now than ever. It's almost like a blueprint for understanding modern politics. Orwell introduced concepts like doublethink,
Right.
Newspeak, and historical revisionism, which we see reflected in current political discourse.
So let's start with doublethink. What exactly is that, and how does that show up in today's political landscape?
Doublethink is holding two contradictory beliefs simultaneously
Okay.
and accepting both as true. It's a form of mental gymnastics where logic and evidence take a back seat to loyalty and ideology. In the world of 1984, the ruling party forces its members to engage in doublethink to demonstrate absolute loyalty to Big Brother. Slogans like "war is peace" and "freedom is slavery" exemplify this concept.
And we see this in today's world, too.
Yes, unfortunately. We see it when individuals cling to contradictory beliefs simply because they align with their chosen political tribe.
Okay.
For instance, someone might vehemently believe that an election was stolen while simultaneously celebrating the victories of candidates from the same party in other races.
Yeah.
It's a cognitive dissonance where facts become subservient to the desired narrative.
It's like choosing to believe whatever confirms your pre-existing beliefs, even if it means accepting blatant contradictions. It's a loyalty test, just like in 1984.
That's a great observation. It's about conforming facts to fit a predetermined conclusion rather than allowing evidence to shape one's beliefs. Think about the COVID-19 pandemic. We witnessed individuals accepting wildly contradictory theories about the virus. Some believed it was a harmless hoax, while others insisted it was a bioweapon engineered in a lab. The common thread is that both beliefs serve to dismiss the opposing viewpoint and avoid inconvenient truths like the importance of masks and vaccines.
So it's a way of justifying inaction or confirming existing biases by embracing contradictory information. It seems like a coping mechanism to avoid dealing with uncomfortable realities.
Exactly. And this brings us to another Orwellian concept, Newspeak.
Okay, Newspeak, that controlled language designed to restrict thought and make it impossible to articulate dissent. How does this concept translate to the language of modern politics?
Well, Orwell's point with Newspeak was that controlling language is a way to control thought. By limiting vocabulary and simplifying grammar, the party in 1984 sought to make it impossible to even conceptualize ideas that challenge their authority.
But we don't have a ministry of truth dictating our vocabulary. How does this apply to us today?
Well, while we don't have an official body dictating language, we see similar tactics employed in the way certain phrases are used to stifle critical discourse. Think about the terms fake news or alternative facts. These have become weaponized to dismiss any information that challenges a particular narrative, regardless of its veracity.
It's like using language as a tool to delegitimize inconvenient truths without actually engaging with the substance of the argument.
Precisely. It creates an atmosphere where people are hesitant to question the dominant narrative, even when they have doubts. It's a form of self-censorship, driven by the fear of being labeled a dissenter. This silencing of opposing viewpoints is a hallmark of both Newspeak and modern-day post-truth politics.
So we've covered doublethink and Newspeak. What about historical revisionism? Orwell dedicates a significant portion of 1984 to the party's relentless rewriting of history. How does that resonate with what we're seeing in the world today?
The Ministry of Truth in 1984 constantly alters records, erases inconvenient facts, and fabricates a version of the past that aligns with the party's ideology. Orwell's chilling line, "The past was erased, the erasure was forgotten, the lie became the truth," captures this dynamic perfectly. Sadly, we are witnessing similar attempts to revise history today, often for political gain.
Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. Look at the attempts to downplay or reinterpret the January 6th attack on the Capitol. While there was widespread condemnation initially, some have tried to rewrite the narrative, portraying the rioters as peaceful patriots and minimizing the violence and the threat to democracy. This is a clear example of attempting to control the narrative by reshaping how we perceive the past. It preys on our short memories and our desire for a more palatable version of events.
Yeah, it's disturbing to think that historical events can be manipulated for political purposes. It makes you wonder what other aspects of history are being reinterpreted or erased to serve particular agendas. And this manipulation extends beyond reinterpreting events. It also involves discrediting or ignoring evidence that contradicts a particular narrative. This is reminiscent of Orwell's memory hole.
Yes, the memory hole in 1984 is a physical chute where inconvenient documents are destroyed, effectively erasing them from existence. In our current context, it might not be a physical hole, but it represents the act of discrediting or simply ignoring evidence that doesn't fit the desired narrative.
Are there any real-world examples of this memory hole concept in action?
We see it when political leaders deny making statements, even when there's video or audio evidence to the contrary. It's gaslighting on a grand scale, an attempt to make us doubt our own memories and perceptions. This becomes even more potent when combined with accusations of fake news or deep state conspiracies, creating an environment where people are conditioned to distrust any information that challenges the official narrative.
It seems these tactics, manipulating language, controlling information, and rewriting history, all converge to create a world where truth is malleable and subject to the whims of those in power.
It's a chilling observation. And this brings us to a case study that exemplifies many of these Orwellian dynamics. The Trump administration's second term, specifically the years 2024 to 2025. This period provides a stark illustration of post-truth politics in action, revealing the key players, strategies, and the potential consequences for democratic societies.
Yes, the Trump administration provides a wealth of examples to analyze. What were some of the hallmarks of Trump's second term that highlight this post-truth approach to governing?
One of the most striking aspects of Trump's second term was his intensified assault on the media, an institution he had already labeled the enemy of the people during his first term.
Right.
He and his allies engaged in a systematic effort to discredit any media outlet that didn't toe the party line, branding any unfavorable coverage as fake news.
Right.
This attack on the media went beyond mere rhetoric. There were concrete policy initiatives aimed at reshaping the media landscape to favor pro-Trump voices.
This seems like a classic authoritarian tactic.
Yeah.
Discredit any source of information that might challenge your hold on power. What kind of policy initiatives did the Trump administration pursue to control the media narrative?
A prime example is Project 2025, a blueprint developed by the Heritage Foundation, an organization closely aligned with Trump's political agenda. This project explicitly called for defunding public broadcasters like PBS and NPR, labeling them sources of liberal disinformation. This is a clear attempt to silence or weaken media outlets that don't promote a specific ideology.
So it's about controlling the flow of information by discrediting or defunding independent media sources. This creates an environment where people are more likely to turn to sources that confirm their existing beliefs, regardless of their accuracy or objectivity.
Exactly. It's about cultivating an echo chamber, a closed system where dissenting voices are either silenced or drowned out by the chorus of confirmation bias. And this control over the narrative was further reinforced by key figures within Trump's inner circle.
Let's talk about some of the key figures who were instrumental in shaping and executing Trump's post-truth strategy. Who are the architects of this approach to politics?
One prominent figure was Caroline Leavitt, a former White House press aide who became a spokesperson for Trump's 2024 campaign. Leavitt consistently echoed Trump's talking points and aggressively attacked journalists who dared to challenge the administration's narrative.
Right.
She acted as a gatekeeper, controlling the flow of information and shaping the message that reached the public.
It's alarming to see how individuals in positions of power can manipulate the flow of information to serve a specific agenda. Who else played a significant role in shaping Trump's post-truth approach?
Another influential figure was Pete Hegseth, a Fox News commentator and a vocal critic of what he termed mainstream education and media. Hegseth consistently amplified Trump's messages, particularly on issues related to education and patriotism, effectively acting as a cheerleader for Trump's agenda and validating his claims to a wider audience. He even co-authored a book accusing American schools of leftist indoctrination, which aligns perfectly with Trump's push for patriotic education. This highlights how the various strands of post-truth politics controlling the media, rewriting history, and shaping education are interconnected and mutually reinforcing.
It seems like these individuals were instrumental in creating an alternative reality where conspiracy theories and misinformation were given equal weight to evidence-based facts, further blurring the lines between truth and falsehood.
That's a keen observation. And it's important to note that this post-truth ecosystem wasn't limited to a few individuals within Trump's inner circle. It was a sprawling network that included media outlets, think tanks, and political operatives who actively worked to amplify and legitimize these falsehoods.
So it wasn't just a few bad actors. It was a whole system designed to perpetuate this alternative reality and to insulate it from any external challenge or scrutiny.
Precisely. And this system thrived on division and distrust, intentionally pitting us against them and creating a climate where any information originating from the other side was immediately deemed suspect.
It's as though we were living in two separate realities, each with its own set of facts and truths, making any meaningful dialogue or reconciliation almost impossible. And within this fragmented reality, Trump excelled at using what has been termed the fire hose of falsehood.
The fire hose of falsehood is a potent propaganda technique where lies are disseminated so rapidly and indiscriminately that it becomes nearly impossible to debunk them all.
Right.
This deluge of misinformation overwhelms people's ability to discern truth from falsehood, creating a sense of confusion and distrust that ultimately erodes faith in any shared reality.
Can you provide some specific examples of this fire hose of falsehood in action during Trump's second term?
One example is Trump's attempt to rewrite his own history on healthcare.
Okay.
In 2024, he claimed he had never even thought about ending the Affordable Care Act, a statement easily contradicted by his years-long effort to repeal it during his first term. His support for repeal bills and his backing of a Supreme Court challenge to the ACA are a matter of public record.
Right.
Yet, in the post-truth world, facts become fluid and subject to reinterpretation, allowing for such blatant contradictions to go unchallenged by his supporters.
It's a prime example of how the constant repetition of falsehoods, even when easily debunked, can create a new reality for those willing to believe it.
Exactly. And this fire hose of falsehood technique wasn't limited to healthcare. Trump employed it across a range of issues, from immigration and crime to the integrity of the 2020 election. He consistently painted a picture of the U.S.-Mexico border being overrun by hordes of migrants driving up crime rates, a claim repeatedly debunked by official statistics and independent fact-checking organizations. Yet these falsehoods resonated with his base, feeding into existing fears and prejudices.
And of course, we can't forget the persistent lie about the 2020 election being stolen, a falsehood that has become a cornerstone of Trump's post-presidency narrative.
The big lie, as it's come to be known, is perhaps the most emblematic example of the fire hose of falsehood in action. Despite losing the election, Trump continues to push the narrative that it was rigged and that he was the rightful winner. This lie has taken root within a segment of the population to the point where some even argue that his 2024 victory somehow proves that the 2020 election was fraudulent. It's a bizarre twist of logic that underscores how deeply entrenched this falsehood has become, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
It's a dangerous situation when faith in democratic processes like elections can be so easily eroded by baseless claims and conspiracy theories.
It is, and this erosion of trust extends beyond domestic issues. Trump's post-truth approach infected foreign policy as well. His stance on the war in Ukraine, for instance, was marked by a willingness to echo Kremlin talking points,
Right.
even repeating demonstrably false claims about U.S. bioweapons labs in Ukraine.
His willingness to repeat Russian propaganda, even after being called out on it, is deeply concerning. It suggests a disregard for truth and a prioritization of personal and political agendas over the need for accurate information.
It does. And these pronouncements weren't just empty rhetoric, they had real-world consequences. Trump's distortion of the truth about Ukraine allowed him to justify potential concessions to Putin and to shift the narrative away from the U.S. being a steadfast ally of Ukraine.
It's a stark reminder that post-truth politics isn't just an abstract philosophical debate. It has tangible and potentially dangerous implications for how we understand and engage with the world.
Precisely. And to fully grasp the scope of this phenomenon, it's helpful to look beyond Trump and consider the broader historical context.
Let's do that. Are there historical parallels that can shed light on Trump's brand of post-truth politics?
There are striking similarities between Trump's approach and the tactics employed by authoritarian leaders throughout history.
Okay.
Vladimir Putin's Russia, for instance, operates with a similar playbook of disinformation. Relying on outright denials, the propagation of multiple contradictory conspiracy theories, and the demonization of any opposition voices.
So it's about creating a climate of uncertainty where people are constantly bombarded with conflicting information, making it difficult to discern truth from falsehood.
Exactly. And this deliberate creation of chaos and confusion serves a strategic purpose.
Hmm.
It allows those in power to control the narrative and maintain their grip on power.
Are there any other contemporary leaders who utilize similar post-truth tactics?
Yes, we see echoes of this in leaders like Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey and Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. Erdogan has rewritten the narrative of the 2016 coup attempt in Turkey to consolidate his power and silence his critics, while Bolsonaro has spread misinformation about everything from election integrity to COVID-19 cures.
It seems this embrace of post-truth politics is a global trend, not limited to any one country or ideology.
It's a worrying trend indeed. And it's important to remember that this isn't solely a modern phenomenon. We see similar patterns throughout history, with the Nazi regime in Germany being a particularly chilling example. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, famously said that if you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. And we see this reflected in Trump's constant repetition of falsehoods, even after they've been thoroughly debunked.
And let's not forget Stalin's use of historical revisionism in the Soviet Union, where he would literally erase people from photographs and history books if they fell out of favor.
You're absolutely right. These historical examples demonstrate the immense power of controlling the narrative and shaping the collective memory of a nation. While Trump's tactics may not be as extreme as those employed by totalitarian dictators, they share a similar logic. Control the narrative, discredit your opponents, and create an alternate reality where your version of truth reigns supreme.
It's a dangerous game, and one that poses a serious threat to democratic societies.
Absolutely. And perhaps one of the most concerning aspects of this post-truth trend is its impact on education.
That's right. We haven't delved into Trump's push for patriotic education yet. It seems like an attempt to control the future by shaping how young people understand the past.
It is. By controlling what children learn about history and civics.
Yeah.
You can mold their understanding of the world and make them more susceptible to manipulation. Trump's Patriotic Education initiative wasn't just about teaching a particular version of history. It was about undermining critical thinking itself.
That's a frightening thought. How does controlling the curriculum undermine critical thinking?
Critical thinking involves the ability to evaluate information,
Right.
consider multiple perspectives, and form independent judgments. It's essential for a well-informed citizenry capable of discerning truth from falsehood and holding their leaders accountable.
So if you can control what people learn, you can control how they think and ultimately how they act.
Precisely. And this is why authoritarian regimes throughout history have prioritized controlling education.
Yeah.
They understand that a population trained to think critically and independently is a threat to their authority.
Are there any historical examples that illustrate this point?
The Hitler Youth in Nazi Germany and the Maoist re-education camps in China during the Cultural Revolution are stark examples of systematic attempts to indoctrinate young people and mold them into loyal followers of the regime.
While Trump's methods might not be as overtly totalitarian, they share a similar logic. Control the information, control the narrative, and you control the minds of future generations.
That's a keen observation. And one of the most insidious aspects of Trump's approach is the way he frames critical thinking itself as a threat,
Right.
labeling any attempt to question the dominant narrative as un-American or radical indoctrination.
So by silencing dissent, he creates a climate of fear where people are hesitant to challenge the official story, even when they have doubts.
Exactly. And this can have far-reaching consequences. It fosters a society where blind obedience trumps independent thought, where truth is dictated by those in power rather than discovered through open inquiry and debate.
It's a chilling thought, and one that makes me wonder, what can we do to counter this trend? How do we push back against this erosion of critical thinking and this embrace of post-truth politics?
That's the crucial question, and there's no easy answer. But I believe that understanding the dynamics at play is a vital first step. By recognizing the tactics being employed, the patterns of manipulation, and the ways in which our understanding of the world is being shaped, we can begin to resist these forces.
So knowledge is power, but knowledge alone isn't enough. What else can we do?
We need to be actively engaged in defending truth and promoting critical thinking. This means supporting institutions that value truth-seeking and evidence-based inquiry, such as independent journalism, fact-checking organizations, and educational initiatives that emphasize media literacy and critical thinking skills.
It's about equipping ourselves and future generations with the tools to navigate this increasingly complex information landscape and to discern truth from falsehood.
Precisely. And it also involves holding our leaders accountable for their words and actions. We cannot allow them to get away with lying and distorting the truth without consequence.
This fight for truth requires constant vigilance and engagement. We cannot afford to be complacent.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I believe it's a fight worth having. The stakes are simply too high.
Indeed, the very future of our democracy may depend on our ability to defend truth and to resist the allure of post-truth politics.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.